All right, so now learning in a pandemic. As the pandemic continues to take its toll on the world and left everybody on lockdown, some individuals are leaving no stone unturned to ensure that learning continues. Indeed, before the Lagos State announced a lockdown, which was prior to the federal government's total lockdown, the schools were shut down and then learning was supposed to go on online. The question is, how is that working out for the students and their parents? How's that working? Are they learning? Is there no distraction in all of this? Well, to help us understand how this is working out, we have here Mr. Pascal Ebohime, who's an education consultant. Dr. Pascal Ebohime, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us via Skype is Annie Bassey-Eyo, who is the CEO of Lani Group, an education consultant. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Okay, Mr. Ebohime, let me start with you. With this lockdown and the way our learning has been in our environment, you being a lecturer for many years, do you think learning is actually going on?
The COVID-19 pandemic that came suddenly to this part of the world had a very strong impact on everybody. So education was radically affected in many parts of the world. As a matter of fact, 1.73 million globally were out of school, learners, during this period. But more importantly, there have been disruption in education. But the luck we had in Nigeria, particularly Lagos State, that I'm aware of, is that week of lockdown directed by the government, federal government, Abuja, Lagos, and Ogun State, the students were preparing for examination. They were just preparing for examination, which is second term examination, end of second term examination. And so because of the lockdown, all the schools closed up. What that meant is that all students with their parents were in their homes. So the first impact is that learning was impaired, completely disrupted. And so the responsibility for these children to learn was now more or less transferred to the parents or to these homes. Then secondly, many schools were responding to this challenge. And so many of them thought of digital learning, online learning, what UNESCO will refer to as distant learning and open education programs. Now, many schools were using online platform, but there are a lot of challenges, so many challenges. We all know that in this part of the world, there are quite a number of reasons why learning is difficult in most homes. Perhaps for those who are educated, particularly private schools, those who patronize private schools, they may have internet access, they may have computer, laptop in their homes. And so most schools that were using online and digital learning, some of these parents took advantage of it. But think about the disadvantaged areas, the local government areas, the deprived, poor. They don't have this facility in their homes. They don't even have a television. The electricity is not regular. Even those who have the internet, the speeds, and sometimes the unreliability of the internet, it has been a problem. But I know many schools were able to cope with this. And what did they do? I know, for instance, a school where I'm the chairman, and know what they did. Immediately, those who don't have internet in their homes, they have to be asked to use WhatsApp, their smartphone. So what
Okay.
the teacher had to do now was to provide a guided learning program for these children.
Okay, I know you mentioned
Quite a number of challenges.
You talked about those in the urban areas or the privileged that might have access to computers. What happens to those in the rural areas, in the local government that may not have access to computers? Yeah, they're choosing to use the WhatsApp, but even the WhatsApp requires data. So how's that working out for those that are required to use data? Is a problem. I mean, I just met someone as I was coming to see, all he has, and he's an elderly gentleman who has children that are in school, all he has is that tiny black phone that cannot,
Balasa.
okay, as they say in the local parlance, yes, that cannot access WhatsApp, not by any wide stretch or even a close stretch. So how would that person and his children?
It's even worse for children in the rural areas.
No, this one's even in Lagos.
Even in Lagos. You know, in Lagos too, there are disadvantaged children.
So how would those kind of people
that is the
learn?
Point, that is the point I'm making. They cannot even afford data in their telephone to use the smartphones. So what did they do?
Children in this class are not able to take advantage
that is the problem.
Of this learning.
That is the biggest impact. That is the greatest impact of this COVID-19 on children learning during this period, particularly under lockdown. The disadvantaged children suffer double tragedy. One, they are poorly nourished, they don't have food. Two, they don't have access to this digital learning. And the top point is that they are the same people ordinarily that would not like to attend school for many reasons.
Okay.
So access to learning and education is even worse for those children.
Annie, so in effect, what we're being told is that children from, let's say, public schools, for instance, and also children in the rural areas are not able to take advantage of this online learning, which seems to be the thing today.
So my take on that, that is summarized as the digital divide. The digital divide is what you have put together beautifully, where kids either from rural areas or people without power or people that do not have access. So in essence, the conversation is beginning to go around that with e-learning, we need to ensure access and equity. Access and equity is a fundamental principle of fair education in any society. So in providing sustainable platforms for e-learning in a pandemic, we must also try to address the issue of the digital divide. There are some interesting conversations going around Africa. In Botswana, we see that there's a lot of interaction with the telco providers. Even here in Nigeria, the Honorable Minister of State and the main minister have launched a program through schoolgate.ng or something of the sort. It's out in the domain. Again, it's access. Lagos State has done the same thing. But I think what I want to correct is the impression that when we talk about e-learning, we sort of surmise it in internet-enabled learning. We have learning through radio, which works very well. I'm happy the Lagos State and Ogun State government have adopted that approach, and they have adopted in a way that it's available on national wavelength frequencies, meaning that children from other states within the Nigerian school curriculum can access that. For many years, my company, we worked with the National Commission of Nomadic Education, and nomads, the migrant fisher folk, the migrant the pastoralists, and the migrant farmers, they don't work in mainstream rural areas. These are people always on the go. And one of the effective ways of educating that focused target group has been through interactive radio instruction, IRI. So there are other available methodologies. There will be digital divide because where you rely only on e-enabled or data-enabled platform, but there's ability to access offline platforms. And that's what our various commissioners of education, the ministers of education, and even at the school level should adopt. We find in Lagos a lot of private schools have just jumped on the e-learning wagon. And It's a good thing, but in some instances, this is just video conferencing. E-learning is just a methodology to reach the learner, and there still needs to be that instructor-learner bridge. The pedagogy must be there, so people are not just repeating things on a video conference call, but people are teaching children. We need to look at the quality assessment. Those are things that matter, because it's not just a matter of teaching, but it's a matter of being able to assess that the child has actually learned something. So this is something very fundamental, and it's a pandemic. I think that's the first thing we need to understand. We can't blame government. It's a societal, it's a call on society to collaborate and take things forward. But I want to really say something which is very instructive. A pandemic doesn't always warn you it will come, even if you have fantastic data warning mechanisms and early warning signs. It will not tell you exactly when it will occur. So there are two things which we need to understand. Disruption is part of the business of a pandemic. And we have two options. Either you sit still and wallow and complain, or you begin to innovate. And I must give it to most of the schools, particularly the private schools, for innovating. It may not be right, but it's a continuous process of evolving. And in that process, there must be engagement with the regulator at the state level, subnational level, that's the directors of private education, housed within the state ministries of education, as well as the SUBED. There must be interaction and consultation with parents, because most homes have become a church, a mosque, a gym, a school, and an office. So the parents must be equipped with those methodologies, and teachers and schools must understand those constraints that parents are working on in order to effect learning.
And the question I wanted to ask you has to do with the parents. When you say parents must be equipped, because, after the children have gotten whatever they're getting from the platforms, the various platforms as maybe, whether radio, internet-based or text-based, how equipped are the parents to carry on the learning as well for these children, to help them go through the process?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And there are a lot of, you could see that parents are frustrated. Even you see the sort of jokes going around on social media. And even today, CNN is launching a program on Sesame Street and a town hall meeting for parents. So it shows that it's not a Nigerian issue, it's a global issue. Most parents are not equipped because broadly, education in its full right is a profession. And if it's done properly, not every parent has that ability. We have abilities to role model for our children, to teach our children soft skills and other wonderful things. And I was sharing with a parent yesterday, particularly for children who are not at assessment points. Assessment points, I would say children at primary 6 or SS3 or the equivalent. Frankly speaking, I think parents should use this time to build other important traits in the children. Traits of responsibility, grit, traits of critical thinking. Those are not things that you need to follow a curriculum to the nth degree and the nth letter. So we need to bear that in mind and not be overtly overwhelmed as parents. But the school and the regulator also have a role to play here. I think just as government is sending information on radio and e-learning, it's also good for government to share information for parents, basic guidelines for parents. And we live particularly here in Lagos, a state with about 20 plus million people. We have quite a lot of people in the vulnerable groups, the poverty, and people who are not, would I say, terribly educated or know how to go about adhering to the school curriculum. We must build that through the PTA, and that's where we need to strengthen our teachers. So it's not just for our teachers to sit online on Zoom platforms, Skype, and Google Hangouts and just roll out teaching for children. Our teachers must engage the learners. They must get feedback. If you're in a private school setting, they can run that through surveys. And even in the public school setting, we can also have some sort of community-wide engagement through the same radio that I think is available to all and sundry. So parents should not be left out. This is a community-led effort. Let's not forget we're Africans. Africans, like Mandiba always said, is about Ubuntu, the spirit of collaboration and the spirit of community. A community raises a child, not just e-learning or a tool.
Okay, and we're going to go on a break. When we'll come back to say, boy, man, we'll look at working with the parents, helping the parents to catch up, because at the end of the day, the parents are not just the parents now. They've taken on the role of the teacher. And then the fact that some schools are even telling the parents they still have to pay almost 80% of the tuition they were paying while the children were in a classroom, a regular classroom. We'll talk about all of that when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We're looking at learning in a pandemic. Dr. Boyman, yes, the students have taken on different measures that have been put out there by government and different schools, as the case may be. But the question of the parents taking on the role of, because some parents are having to work at home, so they are torn between doing their work and doing the job of the teacher. How can that be managed?
Before I address this issue, let me correct the impression. And that is the digital learning and online learning or even the use of radio and television has not been the traditional way of learning by our children. It's a new development in Nigeria, even though in 1 or 2 decades, you have this in the advanced countries of the world. That fact is very, very important. So what is happening is that the role of teacher has been transferred to parents. But the question is, 2 issues are very key in education. One is access to education, and the other one is quality of education. If you use those 2, you discover that this lockdown learning arrangement, where we expect parents to be involved in the learning of their children, is not going to be very effective in terms of promoting the quality of learning. Number one, many parents are not digital, they don't have the digital skills. They don't have. And we also assume that these parents will not go to work, that this lockdown is going to be a very long time. That assumption will not work for many reasons that we're already seeing, because of the social, cultural, and economic upheavals that could come even during this period of lockdown. So the parents are ill-prepared, many parents. We know they go to work, many of them are illiterate. So what we are going to have in the medium to long term, which I would suggest to government, is that they would not have to strengthen arrangement for what I call adult education. Because lessons from this now tell us that we have to be planning ahead. That education for the illiterate, for the poor, through adult education, at least to be able to use smartphone and any other facility they might have in the house. But the truth about the matter, like we said, many parents don't even have the time. Many of them go to work.
Yeah, but doctor, even where they have the time, for instance, I am a pure arts student. If my child were doing physics assignment now from what they've been taught on television, and he or she brings it to me, I will be completely ignorant of what he's talking about, because I don't know the first thing about physics.
Exactly, but that is the...
So I'll be no use even though I am educated.
Yes, that is the first challenge. The first medium to long term is to begin to expose these people through television, broadcasting, through radio, through online video playing, and the rest of them, through the adult education. They can begin to help these parents. But for now, the reality is that many of these parents cannot do that. And I share an experience. As soon as this thing happened in my school, I told primary school and secondary school teachers to use simple WhatsApp messages. And how did it happen? We call it guided self-study to support the parents at home. And what did they do? They say learning objectives for the college, high school, learning objectives, steps to follow to do self-study, type of questions and practical exercises they need to practice. And then they send it to them. Within 2 days, they will respond. and then the teacher will respond. But the teachers themselves needed data. So what we have to do was to provide data to them, the school management. And we were not charging parents. And they were so happy about this. So there was sometimes they make a phone call, direct phone call to these parents who are having problem of understanding the assignment. They will explain to them. It's painstaking. That is not the most effective way of learning. We are talking about quality of education. There are key factors that are important in learning. One is resources, library resources, the quality of teachers, test of the knowledge, activities that are organized for students in the school, extracurricular activities, practical exercises.
Role of the parents.
All these are
the role of the parents not important in learning?
Parents, me?
Yeah.
Not all parents can be. The best they do, parents, particularly those who are educated, is that they support their children learning for their home assignment and the rest of them. But those who go to the market, women that sell and they come back 8 o'clock, their husband, they are night guys and carpenters, they come at 10 o'clock. The children are already tired, and so some of those children don't do their homework. They come back the next morning, you see, teachers say, you have not done your work. They say they could not do it. So when we are looking at quality of education and access, some of those disadvantaged children have no access to education or learning. They are deprived, even within the traditional setting, without this COVID or shutdown. Now, with the shutdown, the problems are even more. We expect that parents, the burden we are giving to parents now is because we feel they are home.
Yes.
But the moment they begin to open up release the ban on this lockdown, and companies are asking their staff to come to work, we cannot afford to leave the children at home.
Okay.
Annie,
We cannot.
you spoke about learning via television and radio earlier. But we know for a fact that a lot of people can't even afford to buy radios, let alone television sets. And anyway, radios are now endangered, aren't they? Because most of us who listen to radios in our cars.
Okay, so Alera, a very good observation, and let's just take this back to the beginning, the foundation. We already had a learning crisis in Africa. The pandemic has only worsened an existing problem. Like I said, do you sit and watch or do you innovate? What we're seeing here is a series of innovation at national, subnational, and school levels. And I think we should be happy that we're seeing some innovation. Because without anything, we are even at point zero. But in doing that, we must ensure that it is evenly distributed. So I go back to your question about TV and radio. I think I'd beg to differ on radio. It's very much also based on behavioral and cultural nuances. In the northern part of Nigeria, virtually everybody has a radio. The BBC Hausa service works very effectively. And most of the radio stations in the north are able to mobilize, even particularly during elections, through radio. I do not see why it should be different for education. And I do not see why it should be different for learning. So that is something that should be adopted, and that's something that we should continue to build on. Regarding TV, we also find that, the average kid knows how to sing a music or a video clip because they have some access to TV. Don't forget, in some of these poorer households, it's not about who owns the TV, but it's about who has the access to the TV within about 15 households in a neighborhood. And children go to watch this, they do watch this. So I think, like I said earlier, it's about community engagement. We need to teach people how to assemble and work together at this very important time. We cannot say we will just wait to have laptops per child. We cannot say we'll wait because we are thinking about a solution. That is a pandemic. It's like a war situation. You start to evolve, and you must evolve as rapidly. But the beautiful side of this is that in doing this, if we're doing it in a very structural and methodological way, we will end up having solutions that will enable us to leapfrog education. The other point I want to sort of harness and buttress is that when you look at learning starts from early childhood right through to lifelong learning. So the category of myself, you, and everyone on the show today are lifelong learners. We do what we call continuous professional development. And people like us can access e-learning because, yeah, but the difficult part are the young learners, the kindergarten, the vulnerable like children with special needs. How I think those are the ones that we're really going to see that, again, we're leaving them far behind. So the solution may not all be in the pandemic. The solution may be post-pandemic. How do we sort of build up the gaps that we observed during the pandemic? So we must collect data now. We must find out at school level, at subnational and national level, if any learning actually occurred during the pandemic. You alluded to school fees earlier on before the program ended, before we went on break. And I don't think there's anything wrong in private schools giving online support. But as some of the commissioners in the country, particularly in Lagos State, reiterated yesterday, we should treat it not that third term has commenced, but that there's a continuing online support for learning. Now, with the matter of school fees, again, it needs to be consultative. What works for school A may not work for school B, for school C, for school D. Every school is at different levels of capital development. I'm talking about private schools here. And their cost structure may differ. Some schools are over 70 years old, some schools are new. So there needs to be a consultation with parents. Don't forget, parents are the stakeholders. You don't want all the parents from your school to withdraw their kids. You also have to understand that some of the parents are going to go through economic backlash, and school fees, school subscription, fee subscription will be on the decline. So it must be a win-win for schools. And this is really where the respective state ministries must really enhance the capacity of their private education departments to see what's going on. But just to summarize it, we need to see data. As my colleague said on the show, the professor, we need to assess, is any learning going on? Because we may just be having video conference calls on Zoom and all these wonderful things, but at the end of 2-3 months, there may have been no learning whatsoever. So again, parents, don't get flustered, don't get overwhelmed.
Pardon me, we have to manage our time. So if that is the case, therefore, how do the teachers who are using e-learning assess the work that the students have done?
So how do the teachers
assess the work that the students have done?
How do they assess the students?
They assess the work that has been done.
How
do they know whether the students have learnt or not?
I've gotten you. So there's a pedagogy. E-learning is a tool. There's a pedagogy around e-learning. So first of all, there must be student engagement. You have different tools on Google Apps, Hangouts, Google Classrooms, and Zoom to kind of get feedback and one-to-one with the student in particular. So you can break up a class of 40 into groups of, like you would do in a traditional classroom. You can do that. And don't forget, children actually learn pretty fast. So the teacher can assess in each of those groups and set up group leaders, the child who is most digitally literate, the child who's learning fast, to work with the other sub-kids and with other kids in that subgroup. So that's one way. Another way is to engage with the parents, to kind of ask, oh, Mr. Labisi, how did Bassey's work go on this week? There must be that engagement. Unfortunately, we're going to create more work for teachers, but if we really are doing e-learning to see that it's quality assured, we need to do that. The third thing is that the schools themselves must set up transparent policies on e-learning. So we need to know as parents and stakeholders, the teacher, the learner, what the expectation is. How are my assessments going to be done? How is it going to be done? That communication needs to happen. And again, it's just about using a tool in the most effective manner to get things done. So if the teacher doesn't have pedagogy, does not have the skills, the teacher will more or less be treating this as a video conference and not getting the message across. The key message is communicating with the kids, getting the feedback to know that they understand. And some of the things you would do in a traditional classroom, you may have to throw that through the window because you know that those concepts may not be able to be delivered through this medium. Again, it's different when you do radio or when you do TV. So we need to bear that in mind. So I really think we need to focus on teacher training and build up the skills of the teachers, which can also be done digitally during this particular period. And some schools did that during the period before the supposed opening of schools for third term.
As we begin to wind down now, the way forward, besides the fact that this kind of learning is somewhat it's not new, but it's somewhat new to Nigeria's learning culture. It is here to stay, because even after the pandemic, it's here. A lot of people are innovating, so it's here. And considering the fact also that our children will have to compete on a global stage, this is like a platform to launch them into that global space. So what would you suggest the best way to get the best out of this for both the students, the parents, and the teacher?
Yeah, very good question. The first thing I'd like to quickly mention is that what makes formal education very unique is the fact that it is hierarchically structured and chronologically graded, which you cannot get outside the traditional school setting. So the way forward is this. We cannot afford to continue to lock down the schools. Lockdown directive of the government, because it's not the only solution to the pandemic. Like the Honorary Commissioner has said. So the way forward is that when we open the schools, let the school open. The first thing they have to do is that the teachers have to be tested and given the clean bill of health, that indeed they don't have the symptoms and they are okay. For public schools, because they have to come from home to work in those schools. But for the private schools, it's even better, because they have boarding facilities, some have type quarters. All they need to do is to now see those private schools boarding with boarding arrangement as community of homes with support staff, right? And they organize them, making sure those support staff, teachers live within those communities, within the schools. And believe you me, the hazards issue that we are talking about, having to wear face masks, having to ensure physical distance, ensuring that there are no large groupings, avoid all those large groupings, like practical exercises, morning assemblies, and have more, teaching going on in the classes. So what that means is that there will be shorter time for instruction, and then this digital learning we are talking about will now come in to complement, this traditional learning arrangement. That's one way to go about it. Now, for public schools, under the lockdown, you have busing system and the rest of them. There are challenges. But the fact that when they come to the school, that could be staggering for large schools, staggering of arrival and closing. So that some will come in the morning and close around 12 and 1, because other extracurricular activities that
are no longer there.
Are no longer there, at least to deal with the issue of social distance, physical distancing. And so they now have more time for those who come in the afternoon. And so for large schools, but very small private schools, all they need to do is to ensure that there is spacing between desk and they wear mask, and they wash their hands with soap before they get into the class.
They still go out there to play.
So yes.
What happens to their play time?
The play time will be restricted for now.
But there won't be any social distancing.
For now, it's a short-term measure. But how did you do that? With the advancing information technology we are talking about, this e-learning, online, there is Zoom, cloud meeting. You can organize small groups where students can interact after school, right? And in the case of the program which I mentioned earlier that I developed over 4 years, what they do is that they have inbuilt practical exercises that will involve Zoom where they can play, and there are e-coaches.
Okay, all right. So, let's get a word from Mr. Bassey-Eyo as we wind down. The way forward in 10 seconds, please.
10 seconds. I think most children would not like me saying this, but maybe a way forward is to assume that we've begun our summer holiday now. And when the pandemic is sort of flattened out, looking at some data coming out of Singapore, we're looking at about May to June. And if schools open in July, then we should run schools through to October. I don't know if some of you are familiar during the Jibril Aminu era when we had 2 terms instead of 3 terms. So I think we just need to adopt such practical strategies because it doesn't look like e-learning will solve the problem for the majority of our children. And we must adopt local, such as radio and TV. We should stop thinking everything has to be online data enabled. I think that is it for me. And just to reiterate, e-learning was here before. We've had Open University in Nigeria. We had the National Teachers Institution. We've had correspondence learning. So it's about a psychological and behavioral change we're going to see. Education has moved to digital. Schools may not even exist in brick and mortar in the coming years. And it's time we adapt it and we, national, subnational level, let's build the policies that will enable to train our teachers to handle the post-pandemic education era.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Annie Bassey-Eyo, who's the CEO of Lani Group, an education consultancy, and Pascal Bohimen, an education consultant also. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll be back in a moment. Please stay with us.